Welcome to The Next Interview, a podcast about careers, life, and achieving our greatest potential. And now, here's your host, Doland White.
So welcome to this episode of The Next Interview. On this episode, I am excited to have this conversation with my guest, Ken Gonzalez, Kenneth, or KenGon to those of us who have known him for a while. And this is a kind of a unique episode because it's not only about leadership, but it's about people who help leaders. And so I'm gonna kind of stop there. So welcome. I'm thrilled to have you here. I'm grateful that we get to do this. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you on behalf of those who may listen to this thing. So great to have you.
Well, it's great to be here, Doland, and thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. You're welcome. My pleasure, completely. So nobody knows you. People know you through your podcast, but we'll talk about that. Well, there's other people that know you, but we'll kind of come around, and I would, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to just start with a couple of minutes just talking about kind of your career, kind of where you've been in your career, which will help frame in some of the questions I have for you, and then some of the topics I think that we'll get into today in our half hour or so together. So I'll stop talking and pass it off to you.
Sure. Well, I think anybody that would ask me to talk about my career, especially when I think in terms of career, I think it's an overly generous term to use. More like a series of happy accidents that came together to have me be at the right place at the right time in order to be able to do things that people found valuable. And I'm hoping that I've left a trail of value over the course of my career. I'm a long-term technologist, roughly since 87 or 88, depending upon when you start counting.
Right.
And that was actually as a Marine in the United States Marine Corps. And I worked on large-scale telecommunication systems, switching systems. So that was my entry point. And from there, I branched into development, then somehow got kind of shunted into infrastructure and operations. I'm really not quite sure how that happened, but it did. And then I met you all those years ago, and I shudder to think of how actually many years ago that was. But still,
it's been a while. Yeah,
it certainly has.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. And by the way, just for acknowledgement, the very first thing obviously is thank you for your service. One of my sons was a Marine, and once a Marine, always a Marine. Wasn't a Marine, but he was a Marine, and therefore he reminds me of those facts. So once a Marine, always a Marine. But thank you for your service. That's very important. It's interesting, I think, to your kind of to your point, how the what we would call the trajectory of our careers, because our careers, we have in mind who we're going to be. Like my initial career, I don't think I've ever said this openly anywhere. My initial career was I was going to be a marine biologist, and I was dead set, and I was going to go do that. And until somebody asked me one day, "Well, how are you going to eat?" And so my career changed, and I became a chef, and then went on from there, and then did other stuff, and ultimately ended up in technology and shoulder to shoulder with you and some escapades that we went through, for a long time in technology. But it's interesting how our careers take us places. But I do believe, Ken, I think when we're doing that, when we're kind of going through that journey, that's part of the extraordinary value that we bring. It's because maybe it's just been there, done that, seen that kind of wisdom that comes with it. And I'm sure that came along in your career. So one of the things that, without mentioning, any particular companies in mind, Gartner, you were a Gartner analyst and had an opportunity to go work with a lot of organizations and a lot of different leaders.
Yeah.
Kind of through that process. So if you're good, I'd like to, without naming the companies that you served other than Gartner, just talk a little bit about kind of what that means and kind of the value of why those conversations as leaders are really important. Because as a leader, you got to know, it's a Clint Eastwood thing. I just said this earlier today. A man's got to know his limitations. So as a leader, that's a great thing about having a good analyst at your side. And you're kind of in your trajectory in your career and the roles that you served, how did you step into role of analyst? How did that kind of come up? Was that a natural thing or something
No,
unnatural?
that was actually completely accidental.
Yeah.
And so the way that this came about was, at the time, I was doing consulting services,
Mm-hmm.
working as an independent, running a small company. And I was very active both in the professional community as well as on the conference circuit. So I was speaking a lot, I was doing a lot of things. And then a friend of mine who I'd been doing some contract work with said,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, have you ever thought of working for Gartner?" And I was like, "Well, pfft." The only thing I knew about Gartner was, they write stuff and people are, they see these magic quadrant thingies. Uh,
Right.
that's about I was never a customer, so I
Sure.
really had no background to what the company did. I was like, well, let's talk. And that's actually one of the things I've learned over the course of my career is I never say no out of the gate.
Mm.
I always
Interesting.
want to be able to say, "Oh, let's have a conversation and see where it goes." And
Right.
then, it's either a yes, no, or a counter offer. So that's, but the person who was the hiring manager for that particular team, he and I had met before, and he'd seen me in action doing presentations, and I think that he looked and said, was like, "Yeah, I think he could actually do the job and do the job well." And that got me the entree. And the recruiting process, basically, it takes quite a long time to get through the juggernaut.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get to the end of the juggernaut, there's this period where they bring you into an office, and at least they did when I joined, right? So they brought me into an office and they sat me down at a computer and said, "Okay, your job, here's the topic, write a paper. You have 90 minutes, go."
Right.
Okay. And then you go off and have lunch. And then you come back. And then, great. Okay. That paper you just wrote. Okay. There's now going to be 4 people in a virtual call, and you are going to have to defend your work. Treat it as if you're going to have a customer conversation. And
Wow.
it was actually quite, and here's the thing about it is most people I think would probably be pretty intimidated by that. But for
Sure.
me, that was fun.
Yeah.
I so enjoyed that because I liked having the conversation, and I don't have an issue with people kind of checking my thinking or looking to see, is that just, does it pique my BS meter or, yeah.
Uh-uh.
And the
Sure.
other thing I thought that I found and that was able to effectively communicate was analysts need to not be attached to the outcome of a conversation. Um, you're there to make the best possible case you can to forward the thing that the person needs to get some information or make a decision about. That's what you're there to do. You're there to serve, and that is my entire orientation. So if somebody doesn't want to take my advice or listen to what I've got to say, that's fine. I no skin off my back. But I
Right.
always approach the conversations with customers with the intent of helping them get to wherever they needed to be. And I would, you know, do whatever I could possibly do, including, finding finding research that they wouldn't necessarily find on their own. So I actually referred to myself as a professional consumer of analyst research
Right.
because I was constantly trolling, looking for things that people were writing that could be made relevant to a customer context. And over the course of the 6 years and 3 months that I spent working as an analyst and advisor,
Right.
I had over 4,000 customer interactions, wrote 45 research notes, and gave presentations, over 45 presentations in different conferences around the world.
Right.
So the thing that I kind of walked away with is really a unique perspective, and I think that's one of the things why an analyst's life is both interesting and frustrating. Um, the interesting part of it is that you get to see things happening at both the macro level and the individual customer conversation level. While many customers would come to me and say, well, we're special. And trust me, I do hold them as special, but
Sure.
not like special education. And
Sure.
also not like their concerns are, oh, wow, you are a unique snowflake.
Right.
No, you actually get to see things over the thousands of customer interactions, which begin to build a view of what everyone in an area is going through.
Mm-hmm.
And that perspective really kind of helps tweak and tune so that when you're providing guidance and making recommendations or providing follow on research that they can look at, you're now starting to build a bigger picture of how all of it is moving that somebody that does not have that access would not be able to see. And that was, I think, both the biggest period of personal and professional growth I've ever gone through because it really fundamentally altered how I listen, how I interact with customers. It's kind of like as close as you can get to a DNA change or alteration as you can make.
Sure. It's interesting. There's a couple of things. I'll go back on a couple of things that you said. The very first was not being attached, was being detached,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's one of the things about being a trusted advisor to a leader, whatever you call a leader, right, inside of an
Yeah.
organization, is you're not there to pitch an outcome. You're
Yeah.
there to help them think, to help them think through and contemplate what are the right next steps and are they truly in alignment. But one of the things, it's interesting, one of the things that I wrote down kind of this morning as I was putting notes together, planning for our conversation was, in my mind, I think one of the powerful things of being a leader is being, how to say this, is on a recent conversation, I go back to conversations. It's like leaders need to be okay with being stupid sometimes, because and some leaders aren't. And we'll come back to those people because I'm sure you had an opportunity to work with some leaders that weren't okay with that. But it's okay not to know what you don't know. I mean, it's okay to not know
Yeah.
it. And I think one of the borders, or one of the cliffs that a leader can step off on is by being too sure, too committed, so that no matter what is presented as an alternative or a different approach or a different view into the business, they've already got the outcome pitched in their head. They already know where they're going to go, and really the purpose of the analyst is there, or my team, or the cadre of people around me is there to back up my decision.
Yeah.
So one of the kind of heading into that, I think, Ken, one of the things that's important, I think that you probably got to spend a lot of time doing, was helping people see the blind spots.
Yes. In
Here's
fact,
what.
I think that one of the biggest things that I would say uh, I would take as a compliment from a customer conversation
Mhm.
would be something along the lines, that's interesting. I never thought about it like that before. For me, that's one of the highest compliments I can get because it was not just a function of being able to provide the right data or to have a fun conversation, but rather but the root of everything I do is around getting people to think literally, not just have thoughts.
Right.
And that's the subtle shift I want people to make. I want them to actually go and be actively engaged in looking to see what are the different dimensions that need to consider, what are the different ways to approach it, and how can you actually cause a team, a group to move towards the kind of resolution that you're looking for without being so attached to that outcome that you're willing to sell yourself and the team down the river to do it.
Yeah. 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 And take everybody over the cliff with you as you go. It's a Thelma and Louise moment, as I like to call
Yeah,
it. But
exactly.
no, so it's interesting you say that. So I think one of the challenges, and I'd kind of like to get your perspective on it, is, and I think this is as coming into the role of, being a trusted advisor in the companies, you're really kind of a leader to leaders, because there's not just justification. You're not there to justify, you're there to provide a new thought or a new view or an affirmation or are you crazy? This, you're standing on the edge of the cliff. How do you, in those kinds of moments, because this would apply to any leader in any situation at any level in any company, if you have custody of people, one of the core components of leadership is to co-create coordinated movement. You're co-creating that movement so everybody's moving in the same direction, which starts with getting people to be open to hearing ideas.
Yeah.
Or thoughts. So as going into those meetings, what steps can someone take to prepare somebody to be open to a conversation, to be open to, hey, we're going to talk about some stuff you might not have heard before? How did you do that?
Well, two things I think are worth noting. So the first thing is to recognize that from a cultural perspective, somebody that is critical of whatever you're talking about or may not necessarily buy right into what you're trying to do is a gift. Why? Because it's natural for people to be, hang on now, are you really sure that we want to do this? They're going to test you. Any leader is going to recognize that, yeah, their staff, the people that they work with, or their partners, or whoever is part of this, whatever virtual team they might be building, they're going to get tested, because people want to be sure that whoever they're working with, whatever they're about to do, that they're really serious about making that happen. I often referred to this as the now I forget the little animals that sit in the field and poke their head out of the burrow.
Gophers.
Gophers,
Gophers is one of them. Meerkats is another one, but let's go with gophers.
Yeah, so they would poke their head out and look around and see, okay, are we actually doing something? No, they're going to test the leader. They want to be sure that this is, otherwise they're going to go back and go back into retreating into their environment and then waiting for it to blow over, because give it a little time, the next thing's going to come along. So that testing is actually pretty important,
right?
And to recognize that this is not something that's unique to individuals, but rather this is actually a team oriented phenomenon. You're going to see that, and there's different levels of that, but still, that's the one thing I wanted to make sure that the leaders I worked with would actually get serious about, is recognizing that pushback isn't necessarily a bad thing. And even if you're getting the, sure, we're going that way, but it's actually, no, we're not going that way.
Right.
You need to kind of sort that out. So that initial reaction is important. And the second thing is, this is really, and I'm totally serious about this, all about storytelling. You have to be able to tell a good story, and not like a story like a fictitious thing, but rather you need to describe both where you're at, where you're going to, and the challenges that you're going to go through to get there, as well as the compelling benefit, why that this course of action would make sense. Being able to tell the story that has somebody go, yeah, that has the ring of truth to it. They'll never say that, but it'll be like, yeah, I actually do think we can do that. I think that will help. Telling those stories is much less of a fill in the blank, Mad Lib exercise than it is an art form of being able to keep people engaged. And even in the face of new information, be able to bring in other points that support the story or show that you as a leader are actually listening and paying attention, so that if you needed a course correction, you're going to course correct. Because I've seen very few instances where it's just like, oh, point A, point B, go directly to point B. No, this is where real life happens, where the circumstances that you're dealing with in your organization and the external environment, where they all come together. We can't predict all of that stuff. So we better be good at being able to keep people informed, and not just the facts, ma'am, but
Right.
keeping people informed as in helping to evolve the story, and then having people be able to hear what their part of the story is. And that's the other thing that goes along with the storytelling, is it's not just the story you're telling, but it's a story everyone is actually embedded in. So getting better at telling the story and showing people where their piece of it is absolutely essential. And I really don't think I got to do enough of that, because a lot of people came in just
Really?
wanting an answer to a question. But I always did my best to try and bring that into every conversation I was having. Still do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we are a story species. We love a good story. That's who we are. In marketing, we call it the hero's journey, right? And every time you watch a 30-second or 60-second commercial, it's the 12 steps of the hero's journey in 60 seconds. Here you go. So it just, one of the things you said, Ken, that I want to go back to, and that is and it's prairie dogs, by the way. It just
Prairie
dawned
dog.
on me. Prairie dogs.
Prairie
Because I
dog.
used similarly, I've worked at, had clients that were, like, Intel was one of my clients for a while. And being in Intel, I had an opportunity up at Folsom to be there. And it's a vast, massive floor of cubicles, pre-COVID days when everybody was in the
Yeah.
office. I don't know if they're in there anymore. And I called it prairie dogging because you could see people popping up, popping down, popping up, looking around. And it's like, oh, we're prairie dogging. That's what we do here.
Yeah.
So but one of the things that you mentioned was, and I think it's important, having the story, which equates to, I believe, people understanding their role, their impact.
Yeah.
Because if they don't understand their role, their impact, no matter what, they're not bought in completely. And you just said it in passing, which was, when people pop up and down in the cube, it was, well, this is going to blow over in time. This is just another thing I'm told to go do, and it's going to blow over. So I think
Wait and see. Yeah.
I'll go get a cup of coffee, and I'll come back, and probably by, I don't know, 3:30, 4 o'clock. That's all, we're going to do something else.
Yeah.
So, and if not, I'll just check in tomorrow. See if we're still really doing this thing or not.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I love that. I love the idea around story, because I do think people have to understand. I call it for the sake of what. They have to understand
Yes.
the for the sake of what and what's their role in it. And that's I would, and especially as you're, as an analyst, or you're in an influencer role, trusted advisor, and it's an influence role where it's, here are the things here's what I see, here's what I believe the steps that you need to take, here's maybe some of the steps you can take, and here's why. Let me tell you the story on what that means. So when you were, without naming names, right? So there's two sides of leadership. There is leadership, kind of through rote fear, which we had a mutual friend say that the other day on one of my podcasts, who just says, this is what you're going to go do.
Yeah.
And then there's leaders who enlist their team to go do things,
Yeah.
And when let's talk a little bit about the impact of being the leader who doesn't enlist the team, who, no matter what you say or do or what you present to them, I already kind of know where I'm going. I wrote the check and I paid you for your advice, but I'm still going to do what I was going to do anyway, because I would be viewed as incompetent if I don't, or I would be viewed as, why did you change your mind? Or I would be viewed, and they have an upper echelon that they report to. So experience is kind of along that line, where you saw, people who candidly just didn't take the advice. What was the impact of those kinds of things, as an example?
Well, a couple things. First is that I can think of several examples where it's, and in one of them, I actually said this, well, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. Either way, you're going to pay me.
Right.
And those are specific circumstances in which I was certain enough about the outcome. And a lot of times this was on acquisition of new technology, where somebody would make a decision that would be a costly decision that they would probably come to regret. So that's one piece.
Mhm.
But I think that the other, it's rare for me to actually go down that path. I would rather be of the line of thinking that I want people to be able to, in the spirit of unfolding the story, because at this point we don't know how the story is going to go. The story is going to go, right. It's going to continue on until the story ends, but
Yep.
lots of twists and turns. So the thing I want to be able to empower the leader to do is, because you're not having, it's one story, but there's a number of different actors in the story, and communicating to senior executives, communicating to boards, communicating to even peers of senior executives. Even if you're one of the senior executives, communicating with your peers is an important thing to do. There's a whole cultural thing, especially in the US, around, well, you know, this is the way it shall be. We will go. And making a course correction during it ends
Mhm.
up being thought of as being, oh, that's terrible. And I cannot recall an example where I was working with a customer where, upon finding out that there was a critical flaw in where they were going, that a course correction was abandoned. Well, I shouldn't say that. Making the course correction was less painful than sticking doggedly to, well, this is
Right.
where we're going to go. This is what we're going to do. Come hell or high water.
Right.
No, they were able to use that as a way of, we actually learned, we got new information. New information sets up the opportunity to make different choices, and we learned something out of it. So even a failure can actually be quite instructive. Now,
Right.
I am not going to be anybody that would come and recommend that we continually go around making failures.
Probably not. No,
Yeah,
no.
probably.
Right. Probably not. No. But I think you're right though too. I think, you are I've told my teams in the past when they say, "Oh, this is, we've got a roadblock, we've got this is going on." And it's like that's great. That's
Yeah,
good, right? There's a couple of causes for it, but the most important thing is that you wouldn't have a roadblock if you weren't on the path.
yeah,
So if you were on the weeds or we weren't doing anything, it would be really smooth sailing. We wouldn't have to worry about crashing this thing.
yeah,
So one of the questions that I have a list of questions for you.
yeah.
And what's your favorite color? Oh, no, I'm sorry, that's a different question. I was going to ask you about your favorite color, but no, when you think of working with executives and in your entire the career, as long as I've known you, you've been a strong advocate and a very clear speaking person working with executives, and very clear on here's my recommendation and here's why, and the story behind it. But when you're working with an executive, one of the things that has to come out through the decision making process and collaborating with you is there's a piece of that involves innovation.
Mhm.
I have to stop and I have to think about things differently. And there's an art to getting people to think innovatively and think from their imagination. In working with some of the folks that you work with, positive or negative in either case, or maybe some of both, when you're dealing with the topic of innovation, how do you take them? What steps can you take? And then we'll flip it, right? So you're helping them make that decision, and then you're also that leader kind of coming back, right? So what steps can I take as a leader to become innovative? But you're helping them kind of through that process, and you kind of become at that point a coach, a priest, an uncle, all the things that it takes. So what steps can you take to help someone to think from an innovative stance?
That's a very good question. So, first is I have to take my own advice seriously and learn how to tell stories. Because if I can't tell a good story about what it takes to develop an approach to innovation or to come to a new understanding of what can happen, then I'm out to lunch. I certainly can't cause someone else to be able to take that on.
Sure.
But I think that there's three things that go into kind of like resetting things when it comes to looking at innovation. The first is that number one, getting the person to understand what it means to be open. So, openness is not just a condition, but rather it's a way of being able to establish an approach. So, we want to be open to new things, but not, and to the extent that you get a new piece of information, you talk about something that might relate to innovation. Oh, I know what that is. No, that's where we want to pump the brakes. So the openness is about letting the free flow of ideas come in without having to immediately take and assess their viability.
Right.
Some people would refer to that as brainstorming, but it's not the act of doing that, but rather the frame of mind in which you're just willing to be in the conversation
Mm-hmm.
and see where it goes. The second is looking at connectedness. So there's a certain relational foundation that exists in any organization. So is there sufficient trust? And is there a level of commitment or interest in the others that would have you both be listened to as somebody that is credible, as well as you're thinking about the credibility of the people around you? So when it comes to being innovative, Doland, I wouldn't trust him to do X. And those kinds of conversations go on a lot every day
Yeah.
and they're often implicit. So we have to take the time to ensure that our relational environment is clean enough to be able to allow people the opportunity to authentically contribute without necessarily being colored by some pre-existing view of who they are.
Right.
And in doing that, you have the opportunity to be really surprised by what people can actually bring forth if they're actually given an opportunity to do so, where they're really listened to.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third piece of it is about intention. I think intention is really important because if you're trying to just, we're going to call it innovation, but really what you're looking for is incremental improvement, there's a pretty stark difference between the two. And it's not to say that innovation can't result in an incremental improvement.
Right.
But for the most part, one of the things I've seen that's been pretty well consistent is, yeah, if you can be more efficient or more effective, that's probably going to be good enough for me because it's not going to be so far off the status quo that it's going to look like it's disruptive. It'll be, okay, you're squeezing more juice out of the fruit. I like that. But
Right.
nothing really earth shattering is going to come from that kind of level of activity. So being clear about what the intention is, and that when you couple that with the openness and the connectivity, it's a very potent combo.
It's interesting to me. I think I like the kind of the combination of the combination of three. I think one of the things, and it does happen so much, is that conversation around trust. And there's two sides. I have to trust me, because if I don't trust me first, that I'm confident enough to let someone do something or move forward on a project or a task or innovation or what. And then there is that comment. And we've been privy to those many times in a hallway where it's like, hey, there's this thing going on and they're going to let, we won't use Dolan's name on this one because that Dolan guy you got to be careful with. But
Yeah.
Andy, Andy's going to go do, well, yeah, I wouldn't let Andy do that. that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
I've never seen Andy succeed, and they're grumble, 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 and it's kind of
Yeah.
like then the general faith in the decision, the innovation, Andy, the whole thing kind of erodes in one big swoop. And
Yeah.
it becomes, then you're back on the path to the cliff again. You're on your way. Thelma and Louise are in the car. You're on your way.
Yeah.
So if you had, I think this is kind of last question. I think when you're advising leaders, and you're a leader in an organization, I think one of the things that leaders, if we're dealing with this with yet another conversation with a leader around imposter syndrome. And I think there's a fear factor that lives inside of some leaders around people they're going to discover I'm the whatever rank I am inside of the organization, and I'm the leader, and I got custody of people, and somebody's going to discover I actually don't know what the hell I'm talking about, even though you may. But there's that fear that kind of comes into that, and you're in that position where you are. You have that two things, I suppose, two sides to this question. The first question is, what do you do about imposter syndrome? And then what do you do about because imposter syndrome can also cause someone to lock their heels and not be willing to move forward with an idea. And a part of it probably goes back to detachment, or attachment. But kind of the last question, because I think that's a prevalent challenge. Fear and imposter syndrome, I think, is a prevalent challenge in leaders today for many reasons. So, your experiences with that.
So first is that anybody that I think there's a certain everybody experiences imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody experiences it. So, and it doesn't matter, even people that are industry recognized experts or, have doctoral degrees in areas. Everybody experiences imposter syndrome. And it goes back to one of the things that we were talking about earlier, which is trust.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not having trust in persons or even trust in yourself, but rather, I think that the antidote to imposter syndrome is being able to say, I trust that I can lead a conversation that will take us to the next place we need to be in the unfolding of whatever that is. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to have confidence. You don't need to, you could be, a doubting Thomas all along the way. But what you need to be willing to be able to do is to have enough trust that the conversation will turn out and lead it in that direction. That's the best antidote to imposter syndrome I've come across yet.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not like you're not waiting for the evidence. There's no set of conditions that need to get satisfied to clear up the imposter syndrome, right? But it's being in action. It's having conversations. It's leading. You got to do the work. And that's one of the things I say on my podcast is do the work, get the result. It's all up to you. And it's like that. So being able to be fully engaged and just, you may not know where it's going, but you're going to lead the conversation and see where it goes and trust that you can do that.
Right. I think that's a great insight, because it is about that. I will tell people to take us one small confident step. And if it's just to have it, just doesn't have to be a big step. So just take a small confident step. And sometimes I think imposter syndrome is it's that nerves. So we both share a common love for music, and as entertainers and performers, it's when you're getting ready to, for me, lay my hands on a keyboard in front of an audience, it's that last little bit of nerves, that last little of imposter syndrome, that last little thing, am I going to remember the lyrics? And then the fingers hit the keyboard and it goes. And it's funny how just taking that one step, to your point, will kick it off. Now, I don't know if people enjoy the music after that or not, but I have fun. I'm
Well,
enjoying
and that's, if you're not having fun, nobody else is.
it. Exactly. That's exactly right. So we've been talking for a while. I want to just kind of wrap up with two things. The very first thing is, or three things, but the very first thing is thank you.
My pleasure.
It's it is an honor to have you here to talk about the importance of leadership and the things that people need to think of, and the importance of seeing past blind spots, and how to get over imposter syndrome, just the steps involved, and the impact of not doing these things, and telling good stories, and being willing to don't make shit up, but tell good stories.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I would like you to just very briefly, let's talk about your podcast, which is how I've kind of stayed in touch, watching you now for a while and watching your podcast. Let's talk a little bit about your podcast. Your podcast is?
It's called Episodic Curiosities, or excuse me, Esoteric Curiosities.
Yeah, and how can people hear it, and what's it about?
So this is done in concert with a number of other people. It's called the Service Management Leadership Podcast. It's available either through my website, kennethgonzalez.com, or you can, if you're using Spotify or whatever your podcast app is, Service Management Leadership, you do a look up on that and you'll see that mine is included as every Wednesday. That Wednesday's my day for new episodes. And as of our recording for this session, I just completed episode 31 last week. And it was very much related to our last question on the whole what were we talking about? Already left my brain.
Imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome. Yeah, so it was referred to as it was a thing I did on the despair cycle of leadership.
Ah, interesting. Yeah.
So, and part of that is I've got a model up on my blog site where somebody can actually go and look at the model, and then I use the episode to actually walk through the mechanics of it. And
Great.
Ultimately, it's like, whether it's leadership or some other domain or area that you're interested in, the bottom line to it is, if you look at the mechanics of how that works and the conversations that get had, the pull for certainty, these are things that end up causing the despair and a downward spiral in terms of our ability to actually get the thing done. So Esoteric Curiosities was a way for me to be able to start doing what I have described as leaving it all on the field. I'm at a point in my career where I'm much less interested in what I can do personally, like in terms of my accomplishments.
Yeah.
I'm pretty satisfied with what I've done over the course of my career. And at this point, I really want to give as much as I can away. Now,
Great.
I'm not retiring tomorrow, so I'm going to continue to do things and hopefully earn a good living,
Yes.
or at least a decent living, right?
Yeah.
But really, the podcast for me and some of the other things I'll be doing in the near future are around how do I give away some of this in a way that others can take it on and start doing good things and building on that as a part of a foundation. I wouldn't ever describe it as being, so advanced that it's like a comprehensive curriculum but I have a lot of different interests and a lot of different experiences. And to the extent that I can share things that will help people or talk with other folks who are really experts in their field, it's a no-brainer for me to want to do. It's really scratches a very personal itch for me. It's about giving.
That's very cool. Well, I will encourage any listener, any of you listening or watching, because you can only watch on YouTube. The links will all be in the show notes on YouTube. and on the website, and I'll include all information around the website and all of that kind of stuff for you. So you'll have an opportunity to go see it. But I would encourage you to go listen to the podcast. Podcasts are our consumable. It's our consumable format. And the great thing about podcasts is it gives us a chance to, it's at our convenience. On the way to the grocery store, on the way to work, on the way to the gym, whatever you're doing, it's an opportunity to go consume information and get better. So on that note, my only ask is that if you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe, follow. That would be wonderful. Appreciate it. But the most important thing to me, and at the close of every podcast, I say the same thing. It is not about building a large audience. It is about, if you know 2 people who are leaders or becoming leaders, and they have challenges in front of them with stress or anxiety, or how do I solve this problem? Share this podcast with them. The information that Ken has provided is very, very helpful and will help people understand how to move their career forwards. And not only that, but to become how to be better leaders, not only with their teams, but in their lives. So I invite you to please go share the podcast. 2 people, right? 2 people share with 2 people. And between all of us, we're going to go change the world. On that, thank you, sir. Grateful. Enjoyed the conversation, and we'll wrap another episode.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to The Next Interview. For more information about today's guest, be sure to visit the show notes. If you enjoyed the show, give us a follow and be sure to join us here on The Next Interview.